So as regards to the origins of the sectarian strife, that's a big question, and it's difficult to answer quickly, but I will do so anyways. I would say both is true. That is to say that sectarianism has historical roots, and to say that it is only present today or recently is wrong, demonstrably so. If you look at history, Sunni-Shia strife popped up periodically, as did Muslim-Christian strife across history. You can find many instances. So that's not true. But it is also true that the intensity of it has really increased after the Iraq War of 2003, predictably so, of course, and subsequently the Hariri assassination, 2005, the Israel-Hezbollah war, 2006, strife in Lebanon between Sunni and Shia, 2008, and then, of course, the Syria conflict after 2011. This has stoked the tensions between Shia and Sunni, as has, of course, the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Has external powers stoked this as well and fomented it? Yes, and by their own accord. There's official documents from the ambassador in Damascus, even before the Syria war in 2006, arguing that the United States should play up the Sunni-Shia divide in Syria and accuse Assad of being anti-Sunni. We have this through WikiLeaks and other documents as well. And there's official strategies, think tanks in Washington, RAND being one, Brookings being one, Project for New American Century before that being one, who all spoke about this strategy of stoking Sunni-Shia strife, sectarian strife, in order, in this case, for Israel, for instance, to gain more leverage over the region. So I think that the conspiracy theories, if you want, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. There were conspiracies, so to speak, or plans to do so and to stoke the Sunni-Shia strife. But that does not mean that there are not indigenous roots to it, culturally, religious, and otherwise. And I think to combat it, you'd have to grapple with both these efforts at manipulating these sentiments and, of course, dealing with the ideological and political background as well. As for the Lebanese case, yes, I do believe, I happen to believe that the Lebanese model, insofar, it's not a perfect model by no means, and I may have given the wrong impression there, but certainly the Lebanese model would offer a template for a solution in Syria or Iraq, insofar as it is one which is based on power sharing between the different constituent groups. And I think to some degree that is also what is being attempted in Astana and elsewhere. So I think it's to some degree the only solution is a power sharing arrangement. That is not to have one sect rule the other sects or one faction rule the other factions, but to have a government which is composed of plural representatives of the society. And that's, of course, very difficult to implement, as it has been in Lebanon, but I think it is the only solution to many of these conflicts. Right now, there are no really signs even of communication directly between Riyadh and Tehran. There were some before, and there are some indirect ways. I mean, Saudi Arabia is communicating, for instance, with Muqtada Sadr, a very prominent Shia leader in Iraq. Absolutely, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the Gulf is one, whether you want to call it Persian or Arab, and that both sides do not have it, cannot see it in their interest that this Gulf is inflamed. Saudi Arabia would lose a lot, as would Iran. It's where their trade artery flows through. So the GCC, if you recall, was established as a defensive mechanism after the Iranian Revolution, against the threat of the spread of this Shia millenarianism, and that threat is still seen to be there. It's there in Yemen, it's there in Lebanon and Iraq. But of course, a broader vision would be one, as you say, to have a security arrangement between the two contending powers. But to see that come to fruition without sponsorship by the superpowers is difficult to imagine. And there we have the problem that Russia probably will be on board for something like that, to shepherd such a, but the United States, being so antagonistic at this point towards Russia, is at this point, of course, sponsoring a coalition of Sunni states against Iran, together with Israel, one should say. And this is why you've seen Israeli-Gulf relations markedly improve over the last years. And today we have this alliance, if you want, of Sunni states and Israel against Iran and to some degree Russia. So what you're talking about would presuppose the major presupposition or precondition would be a rapprochement between Moscow and Washington. And once that would be in place, then maybe you could force the contending parties to give up the bellicose rhetoric and to sit on the table. It would be reductionist to attribute all the tensions of the region, as I indicated before, to this rivalry. But it also is true that it has exacerbated the pre-existent rivalries and conflicts, whether it be sectarian or national in nature. So no, it's not an elixir, it's not a panacea, but it is a precondition. So without that, you won't have it. With it, there's no guarantee, but at least the path could be, because it could be paved for a solution, because they both have leverage on the contending parties. It also goes for Syria, of course. And it is a gratuitous conflict, I think, because the United States and Russia actually, if you analyze it in the final analysis, share the same goal of, they should share the same goal, I should say, of containing the spread of terrorism and instability. Now, they might think they could leverage it against each other, but in the longer term, they both will suffer as well. So I think, honestly, if I'm speaking down the long durée, I think at some point, the United States and Russia will come to that realization, but I'm afraid it's going to be after many more wars and conflicts in the region, and which are not necessary in this form. Again, I don't want to reduce the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran just to being a proxy conflict for the United States and Russia. That would be a gross simplification. But on the other hand, solving eliminating this gratuitous Cold War is a precondition for a diplomatic solution. Yeah, I mean, the Christians are a refutation, if you want, of the Clash of Civilizations thesis, in the sense that they're both, quote-unquote, Eastern, very Arab. Some of them are more Arab than the Arabs because they were there from the start and didn't convert from other sects. But they're also, in a sense, Western. They're tagged by the fundamentalists to be Western stooges, which is not always true, of course, at all. It looks dismal. The Christian communities are in a decline. Even before the Arab Spring, this was the case, but with the Arab Spring, it really became horrific, or the Iraq War, I should say, and the Syria War. They've come back to parts of Mosul, I understand, after the quote-unquote liberation of Mosul. And that's, I think, maybe an exception to the rule. In general, there has been a steady outflow and a demographic decline. What it means to the region, yes, it means it's a loss on many levels, and I think a lot of, one should say, liberal Muslims recognize that. Saad al-Hariri in Lebanon and even Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, they both would emphasize the necessity for Christians as being part of the mosaic, part of being the fabric of this region. Yeah, I mean, what can one say? It is in the interest of the fundamentalists on all sides, whether it's, the Muslim fundamentalists, Christian fundamentalists, or Jewish fundamentalists, to portray the Christians of the Middle East as being aliens to the region, when in fact they were indigenous to it, and a nice blend, in a sense, of East and West. So, and bearers of a very rich culture and ancient culture and language. So, it is a big loss, but it's one I don't think it's going to be reversible. Also because the Christians often are very well integrated then in Western states once they come to the West. So, and of course it's an economic thing too. I mean, the economic situation, not just Christians, Muslims as well, are fleeing the region. More Muslims are fleeing the region even maybe. And they're fleeing for economic reasons and security reasons, and they find the West to be more hospitable to them at this point. Sometimes in a crisis situation, the best of human beings comes out, so one can hope that in the parts of Syria, for instance, which will survive, maybe parts of Damascus, etc., that intercommunal relations will continue as they have in Lebanon, despite the sorrow of the civil war there. it's good to remember that, for instance, Bashar al-Assad's wife is Sunni, right? That they go, he being an Alawite, she being a Sunni, that they regularly visit churches and monasteries. Now, some of that might be for propaganda purposes, but other, I think, it is. I've been to Syria many times, and you do see marriages and services, etc., and intercommunal coexistence. In Ma'lula, for instance, where the Virgin Mary shrine of the Virgin Mary is, you'll find more Muslims women there than Christian women when you go into that shrine. So I think these kind of elements will probably survive even all this war ravaging and clamor. Yeah, it's difficult to be an optimist these days and being truthful. Okay.